No authorised third-party company is able to repair any of the Palomar equipment. With that, I mean they don't have the correct calibration equipment, and especially the software to enable the calibration to take into effect. Because what people don't understand is that, especially with the handpieces, it's a master-slave arrangement where the handpiece is the master and the bass unit is a slave, where all the calibration software required in the handpiece, being the master, would dictate to the bass unit as to what the outputs would be. So whatever you dial into your bass unit, the handpiece will then tell the bass unit, okay, well, I need this much energy to output correctly. Now, when you change or you open up anything to do with that particular handpiece, your calibration is out the door, which means that no matter what you do, unless you have the correct software, it will never ever work correctly. The other thing you have to be careful of is that they use non-genuine parts. To that effect, they don't use any Palomar lamps or any Palomar equipment internally to make it work correctly, and obviously the engineering part is all done back at the factory, and the integrity is obviously maintained via the FDA and obviously locally, which is being TGA over here. What I've seen with regards to dangerous methods in repairing, especially the handpieces, I've seen one instance a metal rod to hold the handpiece together, and in that situation it is very, very dangerous from the perspective that internally you've got some high voltages, especially in the DC range of 330 volts, and if that was to get obviously some sort of continuity between the rod and you were to touch it, well then the outcomes can be very, very lethal, especially in that situation, not just for the operator but also the patient as well. You also got to be careful that the integrity of the safety mechanisms internally are compromised once they do open up the handpiece itself, and in doing so, again, if anything was to happen internally and they were compromised through this third-party repair situation, again, you've got a very, very dangerous situation, not just for the patient but also for the operator at the same time. So you have to be careful that it is certainly repaired by Palomar itself to ensure that the integrity of the handpiece is maintained. In a typical refurbishment of a handpiece, for instance, what a third party would just only do would just only replace the internal lamp itself, which again, even the lamp, as mentioned previously, is a non-genuine Palomar lamp. But as you can see, there are other components within the system itself, which include your fluidics and so on, which are not repaired, which are not looked at all. A Palomar refurbished handpiece is not a handpiece that's been out in the market for a year or two or whatever it might be, over 100,000 pulses, and then redone. Basically what Palomar does with a refurbished handpiece, it's a handpiece that's no more than 3 months old, which is filed as a new product out in the market. It then comes back to the factory, it gets repaired, and then it goes back into our stock as refurbished handpiece, which means that basically it's a handpiece which is no more than 3 months old, which has your usual warranties, the shot counters back down to 0 again, so there's no compromise at all. The other important factor is that because it's only 3 months old, you don't have all the years of deflexing, which could also cause intermittent faults and random faults, which can not only just damage the handpiece, but it could also spike back and damage your base unit as well. And this is very, very common that I've seen out in the market. Only Palomar repaired or Palomar genuine handpieces that have come from the factory are TGA or FDA approved. For the simple reason that once the handpiece is open outside of the factory, and obviously there's no control as to what is going inside those handpieces, and as mentioned before, they do use non-genuine parts, which means that the FDA and the TGA specifications required for that handpiece to be at a certain level has been compromised. So in a nutshell, it is not TGA approved, which means you also compromise your insurance. So if something was to happen, for instance, and you burn someone or something was to happen, there's a good chance insurance can knock back your claim, as it's no longer a TGA approved handpiece to use with your system.